Now, I know I don't look anything like Sam Hartsel, and I look even less like Lance, but you're stuck with me because I have the book. So we're going to learn a little bit about the guy that came out here in the early years and founded this town. Sam Hartsel was actually born in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and you'd be amazed at the number of people that came out of that county in Pennsylvania that come out here. But he was born in Pennsylvania, and some of his ancestors, like 2 or 3 generations back, actually came from Switzerland, and they settled in Pennsylvania, and they bought land from William Penn, the guy who started Pennsylvania. So these characters all have long and important lineages, but Sam Hartsel descended from the Hartsels in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Now, he was in a fairly big family, and I think there might have been 8 or 10 of them. And, he probably got tired of the house full of people. I don't know, but he left the farm when he was about 15 years old and went out to seek his fortune. He was born in 1835, so this was, you can count the years when he's 15 years old. So he came out here in about the days right before people found gold in Colorado. But he came the long way around. He came first, since his dad was a farmer, he learned how to run things on a farm. He was around cattle a lot. So he came out here with some cattle drovers, and he knew that job, so they paid him, what did it say, $4 a day or $6 a day? Oh, got a raise. $6 a month to take care of those cattle. And in those days, for a 15-year-old, that's kind of nice wages. So he came out and he stopped in several places on the way. But about that time was when gold was discovered here in Colorado. So he and 3 of his friends got the bug, and they came out here and went up to, where Hamilton and Tarryall are, right north of Como? That's where they discovered gold out here. And they got their shovels and their picks, and they went over there, and they stayed until their money ran out. It took them about 6 weeks. No lie, that's how much it took. So Sam was kind of looking around. He was not a dumb person. He didn't have a lot of formal education. I think he was what we might call nowadays homeschooled. He was a smart guy, though. He learned everything on his own, and he didn't go to fancy colleges like a lot of the people that came out here, but he learned on his own, and he learned good things. So he came out this way, and he was up in the Hamilton and Tarryall area, and he noticed that the people that were coming in had these oxen, which is cattle, and they'd gotten really, really skinny coming over the plains, and getting clear out here. And he said, there's got to be something we can do about that. So he bought them for almost nothing, and then he put them on some land, and he fattened them up, sold them for outrageous prices, because by that time they had a lot of fat to them. Well, people needed meat, so he got onto something better than gold, because actually there were very few people who came out here and made their fortune in gold. Most of them just went home broke. But he figured out a way to make his fortune. So he did that for a while, and he had established a ranch about 3 miles south of the Hamilton-Tarryall area, and he called it the Pennsylvania Ranch. What else would he call it? That's where he came from. Anyway, it didn't take too long, but in the year 1862, the federal government, in their infinite wisdom, established the Homestead Act. And Sam might have been uneducated, but he was not dumb. So he was in on all these legal things, and he started looking around for a spread, and guess where he found one? He came down here, and he followed the middle fork of the South Platte and the South Fork of the South Platte, where they all came together right over there. And that's where he decided to have his ranch. So he filed a homestead claim on his ranch. Now that was an ideal spot, because what do you need out here to grow hay and to have cattle? You need water. So if you're right there where 2 big, wide creeks come together, you got water. So he was not too dumb a guy. So he filed a homestead claim and started ranching out here. And it's about 2 miles that direction from here. But he noticed another thing about this area. That was those hot springs over there. And he thought, oh, that's a great thing. I can have a hot bath. And the Indians knew about it first, so he let them come in. He said, yeah, this is my land, but you go ahead and use them. So the Indians came and used the hot bath, because back then they all thought they had therapeutic values, so they all used the hot baths. And he got the bright idea, wouldn't it be great, back in the day when they didn't have indoor plumbing, much less hot water, if I could just pipe this stuff down into my house? So he spent a long time putting together a program where he got logs, he bored the center of them like a pipe, and he made fittings on each end of them so he could stick them all together from here, from the hot springs, down to his ranch, which is about 2 miles. And there's just enough of a slope where the water would run downhill. He thought, oh, I'm going to have hot water to take a bath in. The problem was, by the time that water gets down 2 miles away, it's cold. So that was one of his few failures in life, is to run the pipe water down into the ranch from the hot springs. Now, you see another thing over there laying out in the field that used to be a big old water wheel. Now, some people, and when I first started researching, some people attributed that to Sam. He was trying to power his descent of water down into his ranch. Hartsel had nothing to do with that water wheel, I'm sorry. Oh. That was a guy who came out here later and tried to get electricity into town. But that's a whole nother story about the Klein family, so we won't go into that just today. But Sam didn't do that one. Anyway, after he failed at that, he didn't fail at much else. He had his ranch going, and of course he had to have other businesses going to support the ranch, like he built a sawmill so he could have wood to build things. And he had a wagon shop. He had some of the best wagons coming out of this area. Those were all down at his ranch. And then he hired people to come in and build a hotel so other people could come in and use the hot springs. And they built this. This was a school way back then for his daughters to attend. So he was a very busy guy. But you notice he kept 2 miles away from where everything was going on in town, because he was really kind of antisocial. I want to have my ranch to be by myself. But he managed to build a town that had his name attached to it. Now, during those days, the Indians were still around, and he got along pretty well with the Indians because he let them use the hot springs, and they loved that. But he was out one day and riding around on his horse, and he happened to see this whole group of Indians. He thought, well, I'll just kind of go over there and say hi, because they're Indians, So the closer he got, he began to realize, oh, these are not Ute Indians. These are Cheyenne Indians. Ute, Cheyenne, enemy. So he was too close to do anything more about it. So they kind of commandeered poor old Sam. And they were actually here on a rampage, trying to kill their enemies, the Utes. So they forced Sam to join them, and they said, well, we're kind of lost. We want to raid all these villages first, but then when we're done, we want you to show us how to get out of town. And so he was forced to stay with them for a couple of days. When they were finally done, they said, okay, I think they used sign language, because I doubt that Sam spoke very good Cheyenne. But they used sign language. Step on my microphone here. And they said, okay, we're done. And Sam thought, really? I thought, oh, they're going to shoot me in the back. And they told him, and he's still on his own horse, right? So they yelled at him, Pakachee, Pakachee. And he knew enough Indian to realize that meant, excuse my language, folks, we have kids here. What that means is, get the hell out of here. And he did. He turned around on that horse expecting to get an arrow in his back any minute of the day, but they let him go. So that was one wild experience that Sam had with the Indians. Otherwise, they got along pretty well. So he got back to his ranch. Now, it's like 1860. Does anybody remember what happened in 1861? What happened? The Civil War broke out. Now, Sam is out here minding his ranch, and he's all by himself. And the military people came by and said, Sam, you can be a first lieutenant, which was a pretty decent rank to jump in as, if you just come help us fight this war. And Sam said, think about this a while. There's nobody back here to take care of my ranch. I think I'll pass on that, thank you very much. So he missed out on an opportunity to help take part in the only battle that the Colorado Volunteers fought in the Civil War, which was at Glorieta Pass. But that's okay. He was still running his ranch and he did other important things. And you can find out about Glorieta Pass in some other books that have come out. But Sam minded his ranch, and he decided he needed some purebred cattle. Now in those days, ranchers would have cattle, and they would just, run them out and let them run everywhere. And then once a year, they'd have this big roundup and collect everybody's cattle, and hopefully you had yours branded so you knew whose was yours and whose was somebody else's. But Sam didn't like that idea. He said, I want purebred cattle. I want ones that have a pedigree on them. So he went clear over to Kansas and got a herd of shorthorn cattle and started to bring them back. And I think this is back in like 1865 or somewhere thereabouts. So it's right after the war ended. And he tried to bring them back, but he had so much trouble with the Indians, shooting off his helpers. He had cattle herders, that he finally had to stop at Bent's Fort and leave them there for the winter. So he left his cattle. There were like 148 head and 2 bulls. One was a white bull, but he left them down by Bent's Fort, came back home to spend the winter, and then in the spring he went back and got his cattle because they were fine. There were soldiers down at Bent's Fort, and he brought his cattle here. And then he wasn't going to have any of this, I'm going to let my cattle roam all over the countryside. He built more than 5 miles of fence around his land just to keep his herds pure. That was unheard of back in those days. You just let them all, except for one of his neighbors. He had a neighbor up the road. Do you know where Garrow is? Everybody know where Garrow is? There was a neighbor up there who'd lost her husband. Her name was Marie Garrow, and she was a French lady. Didn't speak very good English. But when her husband died, she took over that ranch, and she ran it like a very skillful ranchman. But she used to find a way to get her cows into his bulls, and that's how she replenished her herd. He knew she was doing it, but he couldn't figure out how to stop her. So there was more than one ranch that had shorthorn cattle that were purebred. They were, it wasn't just Sam's. But he was very adamant about keeping his cattle pure, because the more pure the breed is, the better the meat is and the better sales you get. And he was right about that. So anyway, some of the history says that he also ran sheep and pigs. The only time he had sheep and pigs was for his own personal use. When his household got hungry for mutton or pork, they had their own little stash, but he did not commercially run sheep and pigs. He hated sheep. Sheep don't get along with cattle. You don't get sheep on my ranch. So he was a cattle. Now years after he sold the ranch, then they started to run sheep out here because the market was better for sheep. But not Sam. Sam was not a sheep man. He was a cattle man. And so he ran his cattle. Now, over the years, Sam kind of decided he's getting a little lonely. And he was tired of being by himself. So he started looking around, and he was like 42 by now. In those days, because usually in those days, the life expectancy was not like it is now. You usually were about half dead by the time you were 40. So he thought, well, it's about time I find somebody. So he started looking around. And there was a lady down in Buena Vista, on a ranch near Buena Vista, whose husband had died. Frank Mayo had been He had been in France. He had been a surgeon for the military in France. And he came over here and started his own ranch. And he married a lady, and the ranch is down there by Buena Vista. And she had a child, and she died during that childbirth. But one of the ladies that were living with them was named Nancy, and Nancy Boone. Now, what kind of thing does Boone strike in your memory? Yes, she was descended directly from, I don't know how many generations back. I tracked it one time, it's like 5 generations back, to the famous Daniel Boone. But after Frank Mayle's wife died in childbirth, the baby lived, by the way, it was a little girl named Amelia. Then Nancy became Frank Mayle's wife. And not only did they take care of Amelia, but they had a child of their own called Rose. So Nancy had 2 really daughters, one stepdaughter and one of her own, and when Frank died. And here she is all by herself. So Sam went down there and started to court her, and they got married in 1877 on the ranch down there that belonged to her father. So now, Sam was a very pragmatic man, and he tried for many years to get that ranch, but Nancy would never let him have it. So, but they came out here, and she came to the ranch, and then they proceeded to have their own family. So they had Catherine and Henrietta and another daughter, and so they had 3 girls, and then finally they got a little boy whom they named Sam Jr. And sadly, Sam Jr. died within a couple of years of his life. Now, one of the first reports I got was that he drowned in an irrigation ditch. But then I got to digging around, and it turns out that he didn't drown. He just got a fever of some kind that he never recovered from. So Sam lost his little boy, and they had to bury him here. Do you know where the little cemetery is up on the hill over there? So they buried the little boy, Sam, in the cemetery up on the hill there. And it was probably a pretty sad day for them. But there used to be some other people up there too. I hope I'm getting my years right, but in 1872, Sam's mother decided to come out and have a visit. She came from Pennsylvania. Now, you know, when you're researching and writing about history, it's very perplexing, because the more things you get answered, the more questions pop up, you know, and you don't ever get answers for. And I'm here to tell you that as soon as you write a book and get it in print, 3 people find mistakes, you know. So, I mean, that's the way it is. But anyway, Sam, where was I talking about?
His mother.
His mother came out here in 1872 to live with her. She stayed here for a year, and then she died. So she was buried up in the little cemetery up on the hill in 1873. Now, they weren't done yet with that cemetery, because Sam's brother, a lot of his family came out here for one reason or another, but Sam's brother Joseph decided to come out here too. And I think Joseph was a worse recluse than Sam was, because Joseph didn't stay to help Sam around his ranch. Joseph got his own ranch that was 7 miles down Highway 9 right off Current Creek towards Guffey. So Joseph had his own little home ranch down there, and he ran cattle. Well, I tried to find out when Joseph came out here, and so far I've been unsuccessful, but I will figure that out one day. I said, you know, it's very frustrating, because you can only find answers to some things, and then they prove you wrong. But at any rate, he was around here during the census in 1880. So I know he was here by then. But Joseph, I said he was a recluse. And he came to town. There was a little post office down there that he got his mail at. So he went down there, went and got his mail, took it home, and dropped it on the table. And that's the last anybody ever saw him. He just disappeared off the face of the earth. And they thought that maybe he had run across a bunch of cattle thieves, cattle rustlers, and the cattle rustlers got rid of him because they didn't want him to be a witness. And they had all sorts of things happening to poor Joseph, but they found the stuff that he left, and no sign of him anywhere. What happened to Joseph? 2 years went by. Sam was in touch with the governor, and he was in touch with all of the local officials. They finally offered a $500 reward for anybody who knew anything about what had happened to Joseph. Not a thing showed up. $500 is a big chunk of change back in those days. 2 years later, in 1903, there was a prospector that was kind of wandering around in the hills down in there, and he came across this cadaver with no head. Oh. And it had boots, and it had a yellow slicker, kind of wrapped around it because like it was cold. And Sam identified his brother Joseph by the boots. Oh. What they finally figured out was what probably happened was Joseph was out in a rainstorm, and the lightning struck and killed him. The horse got away, but poor Joseph was knocked off the horse and was on the ground. And they figure coyotes got the head, but that's kind of a grisly story. But anyway.
But typical.
Yeah, very typical. So that's what happened to the brother Joseph. Sam took those boots and had him take them off him, because back those days, you didn't wear your boots when you got buried unless you were a desperado. So he couldn't have his brother being buried as a desperado. So he took the boots and he put them on the ledge outside his window at the ranch for a number of years. Anyway, they finally figured out what happened to Joseph. So Joseph was buried up there in the little Hartsel cemetery. Now, there aren't very many other people up there, and they aren't there anymore either. But we'll talk about that in a minute, what happened to them. So Sam was around, and let's see what else happened to him. Oh, I don't want to keep you too long, but there are so many stories I'd love to tell you. And one of my favorite things is telling stories. In the year 1891, there was a guy that lived over, you know where Trout Creek Pass is? I just live right off Trout Creek Pass. You know where Chubb's Park is? Okay, well, there was a guy down there that, maybe a mile or two down the road towards Buena Vista. There's a place that used to be called, first it was called Newitt, because Chubb Newitt named the town after himself. And he called it Divide, and anyway, it was a little town that he was building to get the railroads to come by his place, because he was going to make a whole bunch of money with a hotel and a corral, and he was shipping cattle and things down there. And they were all anxious for the railroad to come through, but the railroad just went right on by him. So Chubb says, oh, well, okay, you're going to be that way. So he loaded his building, which was a store, he cut it in half and loaded it onto 2 flatbed railroad trains, shipped it over to Garrow, and you know that little green store that's there? That was Chubb Newitt's place. Shipped over from Divide. So, if at first you don't succeed, use a bigger hammer. So Chubb used a bigger hammer, opened up his store, ran it for many, many years, and he sold many things out there. It was a general store. And he among the other things that he sold was shotguns. Now, Chubb was a very likable guy, and that year, it was 1891, he had just gotten elected to be one of the county commissioners. So he was just getting ready to take office, and he was down at his store just showing some guy the gun, and they dropped it on the floor. Well, evidently somebody else had tried to show that gun and had loaded it. Gun went off, shot Chubb in the rear end, and he died a few days later of lead poisoning. Now, I had to read the commissioner's minutes to find this. And it's buried deep into the files over at the clerk's office in Fairplay. The commissioner's meeting had to replace Chubb Newitt because he'd just been elected as a county commissioner. Do you know who they replaced him with? Sam Hartsel. That's the only place I've ever been able to find that story. So Sam, among his other accomplishments, became a county commissioner. So all the things he's done over the years, and all the trouble he's gotten into and all the successes he had, during the 1900s, he was successful with his blacksmith shop and all the things down at his ranch, and the town was bustling, And the hotel was getting lots of people coming in so they could go over to the hot springs and take the baths. And he decided, well, I think it's about time for me to go for an easier place. They were looking at water rights back then. Water rights was becoming a huge issue in those years, as it has over the years, and it's even worse now. But he first got an offer in 1902 and said, no, I'm going to stay. But after his wife took the girls into Colorado Springs to go to the Loretto Academy to school, and then she moved into Denver by herself, he said, okay, I see the handwriting on the wall. So he sold his ranch in 1907. And it took him a few years to get everything all taken care of. And meanwhile, wife Nancy is in Denver living with the girls. And so when they sold the ranch and they sold all of the cattle and everything, that was a big day for the county. They had a big party, huge barbecue here. And everybody came to the sale for Sam Hartsel's ranch. But a couple guys bought it, and they did some other things with it. And then at that time, he hadn't sold the town site, because the town site was completely separate. But in 1908, he decided, well, I better get rid of that too, and he sold the town site. And they started to develop the town. But now we're getting into the history of the town, and I really want to stick with Sam. So for today, maybe another time we'll talk about the town, because there are lots of fascinating things that came on with this town later. But he sold both his ranch and the town site by 1908 and went to Denver. And he was getting ready to buy another farm. He had, paid for it and signed all the papers. And so he wanted to go into farming again. But in 1910, Nancy got sick and she passed away. So now he's single and he's got his daughters, which are marriageable age now, so they are marrying one by one. And for some reason, and here's another one of those things that you try to find the answer to and can't, he got really mad at one of his daughters because he didn't like the guy she married. Now, Dr. Pruitt was a nice guy. He actually attended Nancy when Nancy was in her final days. And so I don't understand, can't find anything why Sam hated him so much. And he threatened his daughter, said, now you either divorce this guy or you're out of my will. Now, I don't know what finally happened, because she didn't divorce the guy. She stayed with him. But Sam was kind of an obnoxious character in some ways. And I really would like to know why he took such a dislike to Dr. Pruitt, because Dr. Pruitt took care of his wife in her final days. But that's one of the mysteries that you find when you're looking at fiction and non-fictional characters. So he went for a few years, and in the year 1918, he was still running around and trying to finish up the paperwork on buying that ranch east of Denver. And he was running up the stairs, and the papers say he had a stroke. Another paper said he had apoplexy, I can't even pronounce that. But it sounds to me like he had a massive heart attack. So he dropped and passed away right on the spot. So in 1918, he ended the life of Samuel Hartsel. Pretty successful life, though, wouldn't you say?
He lived a long time.
Yeah, and he was, what does that make him? 84? It was 3 days ahead of his 84th birthday, because it was in November. So that's how this town got started. That's how this area got Sam Hartsel's name. And I'd like to tell you how I got onto all this stuff. I mean, I came out here, as Linda said, my husband and I built our house over in Rancho de the Rockies in 1997. First thing I did was come in here and go to the little library. Well, I'm a book reader from way back. And so I was looking at the books, and finally one of the librarians came over to me and said, here, do something with this. What it was a packet of information that the family who owned the store, the Klein Connect store, had gathered and written down. It's all typewritten. Do something with this. So I took it home and I looked at it, full of pictures. The picture of Sam and his wife Nancy and the girls. It was all in that packet. So that's my first attempt at writing about the local history. And they made me do it because they handed me this packet and said, do something with this. So I got really fascinated with the area, and I've never stopped being fascinated with this area. So we have lots of other stories, but for now, I'd like to just leave you with Sam Hartsel. Think of what he accomplished. Built this whole town, and he did something with his life, and he was homeschooled. He never even had an education. Would that we had that kind of energy. Can you imagine? Anyway, he was a great guy, even though he was a stubborn cuss. I'm sure that a lot of people thought that. And he got mad at people. But it takes pioneers like that to build a town. And we have the town that he built.